What if I told you that some of the most spiritually awakened people you know aren't sitting in church pews anymore? They're quietly walking away, not because they've lost their faith, but because they've found something deeper. What if this is happening to you too and you don't even realize it yet? There's a quiet exodus happening, one that isn't making headlines or causing loud protests. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's there. People who once sat in the front rows of church pews, sang the loudest during worship, and clutched their sacred texts with trembling hands, are quietly walking away. Something inside them has changed. This isn't a story about rebellion. It's not about anger or defiance or rejection of faith. It's about a journey, a deep, personal, often painful journey towards something more. You might have felt it too. Maybe you still feel it. That gnawing sensation that something doesn't fit anymore. That the answers you once accepted without hesitation now raise even more questions. That the sermons that used to move you now feel empty. This isn't about losing faith. It's about finding something deeper. And if you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. But to truly understand why this is happening, we must start at the beginning. Maybe you grew up in the church. Sunday mornings weren't just another day of the week. They were sacred. The smell of wooden pews, the sound of an old piano playing hymns, the familiar warmth of voices rising together in song. It was all so comforting, so familiar. You learned the stories, David and Goliath, Jonah and the whale, the parables of Jesus. These weren't just stories, they were lessons, truths etched deep into your heart. And you believed. Oh, how you believed. You trusted the people standing at the pulpit. You trusted the words spoken over you, the prayers whispered into the silence. You trusted the rules and the rituals because they made you feel safe, because they promised answers to the big, scary questions of life. Questions like, why are we here? What happens after we die? How do we live a good life? For a long time, it was enough. But then, something changed. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like drops of water wearing away at stone. Maybe it was a sermon that didn't sit right with you, a comment made in passing, a moment when you looked around and realized that the love being preached from the pulpit didn't match the actions of the people sitting in the pews. Or maybe it was something deeper, an unshakable feeling that you couldn't quite put into words, a voice inside you saying, there's more than this, there's something you're missing. At first, you pushed it down. You told yourself you were being doubtful and going through a dry season. You prayed harder, attended more services, joined more groups. But the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it grew louder. And then one day, you realized something. You weren't losing your faith, you were outgrowing the box it had been placed in. For centuries, organized religion has been a cornerstone of society, a guiding force, a moral compass, and a place of refuge. Churches, mosques, and temples have been more than buildings. They have been symbols of community, belonging, and hope. But something is shifting. You felt it. Maybe you've seen it too. The sermons that once felt alive now feel rehearsed. The community that once felt like family now feels transactional. The words that once inspired you now feel hollow. It's not because you've lost your faith. It's because the structure you placed your faith in has stopped serving its purpose. This exodus of spiritually awakened individuals isn't random. It's not a fluke. It's a response, a reaction to something much deeper. Let's start with a difficult truth. Many organized religions, despite their good intentions, were built with control in mind. Control over behavior, control over thoughts, and control over people. Rules and rituals were created to guide people towards spiritual truth and maintain order, loyalty, and obedience. And for a long time, it worked. But here's the thing about spiritually awakened people, the chosen ones, if you will. They crave connection, not control. They don't want to be told what to believe. They want to discover the truth for themselves. They don't want to be confined to rituals. They want to experience the divine in every moment of their lives. They don't want to be bound by fear of punishment. They want to be guided by love and curiosity. But for many churches, fear remains the primary tool for keeping people in line. Fear of hell, fear of being judged, fear of asking the wrong questions. And that fear is starting to crack under the weight of awakening. People are beginning to realize that true spirituality doesn't thrive in fear, it thrives in freedom. There's another reason people are leaving, and it's one of the hardest to discuss: hypocrisy. You've seen it. The preacher who speaks about humility while building a personal empire. The congregation that talks about love but shuns those who don't fit their mold. The emphasis on forgiveness, except when it comes to certain people. When actions don't match words, the message loses its power. And for spiritually awakened people, authenticity is everything. They can't unhear the contradictions. They can't ignore the double standards. They can't reconcile a message of love with actions that breed exclusion, shame, and fear. So they leave, not because they no longer believe in the message, but because they can no longer support the messengers anymore. But walking away, that's not easy. For most people, faith isn't just a belief. It's an identity, a community, and a family. You might have thought to yourself, if I leave, what will they think of me? Will they call me lost? Will they say I've fallen away? Will they pity me, or worse, reject me? The guilt might have kept you awake at night, and you might have felt like you were betraying something sacred, something pure. But deep down, you knew the truth. Staying would mean betraying yourself. For some, the departure is sudden, a breaking point, a final straw. For others, it's a slow fading away, a missed Sunday here, an unanswered message there, until one day you realize you're gone. But even after leaving, the weight of it lingers. You still hear the echoes of old sermons in your mind. You still feel the sting of disappointment from those who once called you family. It's lonely, it's confusing, and it's deeply, deeply painful. But here's the thing. You're not broken. You're not lost. You are awakening. You see, leaving the church isn't about rejecting faith. It's about refusing to accept a version of faith that feels hollow. It's about realizing that God, the universe, or whatever you believe in, isn't confined to a building, a doctrine, or a set of rules. It's about understanding that spirituality isn't something you visit on Sundays, it's something you carry with you every single day. And this journey you're on? It's not a fall from grace, it's a return to truth. But before we dive deeper into this awakening, let's pause, because right now, you might be feeling a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, confusion, maybe even anger. And that's okay. Take a deep breath. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. But for now, know this. You're not alone. And this isn't the end of your spiritual journey. It's just the beginning. What if this isn't a crisis of faith, but a revolution of the spirit? What if the quiet departure of so many chosen ones isn't about abandoning belief, but about answering a higher calling? What if this exodus is a sign of something much bigger than we realize? What if leaving the church isn't the end of your spiritual journey, but the very beginning of a deeper connection to something sacred? What if this feeling isn't a mistake, but a sign? There comes a moment, a quiet, undeniable moment, when you realize something profound. The path you've been walking no longer feels right. It's not that you stopped believing in something greater. In fact, it might be the opposite. You feel something more, something bigger, deeper, more expansive than any sermon could ever explain. It feels like waking up from a long sleep. But here's the thing about waking up. It's disorienting. The light feels too bright. The silence feels too loud. And for a while you might question whether you made a mistake. But you didn't. This feeling, the restlessness, the discomfort, the questions that won't stop swirling in your mind, it's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign that you're falling away. It's a sign that you're awakening, and awakening is rarely comfortable. For many people who leave the church, the hardest part isn't the act of leaving. It's facing what comes next. Because for years, maybe even decades, you were given a roadmap, a set of answers, a clear structure to follow. Do this, and you'll be saved. Pray like this, and you'll be heard. Believe this, and you'll belong. But when you step away from that structure, it feels like being dropped in the middle of a vast, uncharted wilderness. No guide, no map, just you and your questions. And at first, that wilderness is terrifying. You might long for the safety of the familiar. You might even consider going back, just to feel grounded again. But something stops you, because deep down, you know you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you now know. That voice inside you, the one that led you here in the first place, it won't let you go back. Because this isn't about running away from something. It's about moving towards something better. Here's where things start to shift. For so long, religion and spirituality might have felt like the same thing. But they're not. Religion is often about structure, about belonging to a community, about following a shared set of beliefs and rituals. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But spirituality? Spirituality is different. Spirituality is raw. It's deeply personal. It's a quiet conversation between you and the supernatural, with no one standing in between. It doesn't require a middleman. It doesn't need someone to interpret sacred texts for you or tell you when you're worthy of connection. Spirituality is messy. It's imperfect. It doesn't fit neatly into Sunday services or scripted prayers, but it's real. And for many people, especially those who are awakening, it's the only thing that feels real anymore. You might not have words for it yet, but you feel it, don't you? That pull, that quiet, magnetic pull towards something more. This isn't about rejecting God or love or faith. It's about realizing that those things aren't confined to one place, one book, or one institution. They're everywhere. In the laughter of a child, in the stillness of a quiet morning, in the messy, unpredictable beauty of your own life. But awakening isn't easy. It's not a straight path. It's not neat or tidy. Some days you'll feel deeply connected to something greater, like you're swimming in an ocean of love and light. Other days, you'll feel lost, alone, like you've taken a wrong turn somewhere. But here's the truth. There's no wrong turn on this journey. Every question, every doubt, every tear you've shed, it's all part of the path. And every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to the truth you've been seeking all along. You see, this isn't about abandoning faith. It's about transforming it. It's about letting go of the idea that faith has to look a certain way, or sound a certain way, or happen in a certain place. It's about realizing that faith isn't about certainty. It's about trust. Trusting that even when you don't have all the answers, you're still on the right path. Trusting that the voice inside you, the one that led you here, won't lead you astray. Trusting that it's okay to ask questions, to wrestle with doubt, to not have it all figured out. Because true faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to keep searching. Here's what I want you to know. You're not alone in this. There are others. So many others walking this same path. Quietly, courageously, one step at a time. And this path, it doesn't lead away from truth. It leads towards it. But why are so many spiritually awakened people just like you, feeling this pull? Why are the structures that once held meaning now starting to crumble? Most importantly, what does it all mean for the future of faith, spirituality, and humanity as a whole? Walking away from a system, a belief, or a community that once defined so much of your identity isn't just a decision. It's a battle. But the battle isn't fought in public. It's not loud or dramatic. It happens in silence, in the quiet moments when you're lying awake at night, replaying conversations in your mind, in the aching silence after you've left a message unanswered because you don't know how to explain, in the sting of judgment in someone's eyes when they realize you're not coming back. This conflict isn't just external, it's internal. Because even when your heart knows you're on the right path, your mind can't stop asking, but what if I'm wrong? What if they're right about me? What if I've walked away from something sacred? From the moment you stepped into a place of worship for the first time, expectations were placed on your shoulders. How to act, how to think, how to believe. You carried those expectations without question for a long time. They felt light, manageable, even comforting. But as time went on, they started to feel heavier. You were told to have faith, but not to ask too many questions. You were encouraged to seek God, but only within certain boundaries. You were taught to love others, but only if they fit into a specific box. Slowly, those expectations started to feel like chains. But here's the thing about chains. They're not easy to break. When you started questioning, noticing the cracks in the foundation, you weren't just wrestling with ideas. You were wrestling with the weight of those expectations, the fear of disappointing people you care about, and the dread of being labeled lost, backslidden, or fallen away. And maybe you tried to stay. Perhaps you tried to silence those questions, push down those doubts, force yourself back into the mold. But eventually, you couldn't, because the price of staying was becoming too high. You couldn't keep betraying yourself just to meet someone else's expectations. But even now, those chains still rattle in your mind. What if they're right about me? What if I'm the one who's wrong? And those thoughts, they cut deep. One of the hardest parts of leaving the church isn't the act of leaving. It's facing the people you leave behind. The looks, the whispers, the pity in their voices when they say, "I'll pray for you." It's how they make you feel like you've failed them, like you've walked away from something sacred, and maybe you've tried to explain. Maybe you've said things like, "I'm not leaving God, I'm just leaving this system. I still believe, but I need to find my own path." But your words fell flat, because for many people there's no difference between leaving the church and leaving God, and so you're left carrying that judgment. But here's something you need to hear. Other people's opinions of your journey do not define your truth. Take note of that. Their judgment, disappointment, and pity are not a reflection of your path. It's a reflection of their fear. Because when someone sees you walking away, it forces them to question their own beliefs, and questioning is scary. So, instead of facing their doubts, they project that fear onto you. But that's not your burden to carry. Leaving the church often feels like stepping into a wilderness. It's quiet, too quiet. The structure, the routine, the familiar faces, they're gone. And in their place is silence. At first, that silence is deafening, because in the church every question had an answer, every doubt had a prayer, every fear had a verse. But out here in this wilderness, there are no easy answers. It's just you and the silence. And sometimes that silence feels like abandonment. You might even start to think, did I make a mistake? Is this punishment? Did I walk away from something sacred, something real? But here's the thing about the wilderness. It's not a place of punishment. It's a place of transformation, because in the silence, something incredible happens. You start to hear a different voice, not the voice of a pastor or a doctrine or a tradition, but a voice deep inside you, one that's been whispering all along. A voice that says, you're not lost, you're not alone, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Every spiritual journey has a turning point. It's the moment when you realize that the fear you've been running from isn't as powerful as you thought. It's the moment when you stop looking over your shoulder and start looking ahead. For some, this moment comes in quiet stillness, a sunrise, a song, a conversation with a friend. For others, it comes in a moment of deep despair. A night when you hit rock bottom and realize you're still here. But no matter how it happens, the realization is the same. You don't need permission to seek truth. You don't need validation to trust your path. You don't need someone else to tell you that you're worthy. You already are. Here's the truth most people don't talk about. Even after leaving, the conflict doesn't completely disappear. There will still be days when you feel guilt creeping in. There will still be moments when you miss the comfort of the familiar. There will still be voices in your head telling you, you're wrong. Go back. But those moments don't mean you've made a mistake. They mean you're human, and every time you face that conflict and choose to keep walking, you grow stronger. Because this path isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to keep searching. But here's the beautiful part. This exodus doesn't lead to spiritual emptiness. It leads to spiritual freedom. People are beginning to realize that spirituality doesn't require an institution. It doesn't require permission. It doesn't require intermediaries. It doesn't require someone else telling you what's sacred and what's not. More and more people are turning inward. They're connecting with God, not in a building, but in each other. And the most incredible part, it's working. They're finding peace. They're finding purpose. They see a connection to something so vast and beautiful that it leaves them breathless. And they're realizing something powerful. The divine isn't limited to sacred spaces. Divinity is woven into the very fabric of existence. But here's where the conflict intensifies. While many are leaving, others are staying, and those who stay often feel threatened by those who leave. Because if people are finding spirituality outside the church, what does that mean for the church itself? It's a question that terrifies institutions. If people stop relying on them for connection, answers, and salvation, what happens to their power? But here's the truth. This isn't about destroying religion. It's about transforming it. Because spirituality isn't dying, it's evolving. And the people leaving the church aren't walking away from faith. They're walking towards something more honest, more personal, and more real. This isn't just your story, it's a global phenomenon. All over the world, people are waking up. They're asking questions they were once too afraid to ask. They're seeking answers in places they were told not to look. They're finding courage to trust their inner voice over external authority. And the truth is, this isn't a crisis, it's a rebirth of faith, a rebirth of spirituality, a rebirth of connection. Because at the end of the day, people aren't walking away from God. They're walking away from systems that try to keep God locked in a box. So where do we go from here? If you've walked away or are thinking about it, what's next? How do you build a spiritual life without the structure you once relied on? How do you find community, purpose, and peace on your own terms? Ask yourself, what does spirituality mean to me? Spirituality isn't about rules, it's about connection. So give yourself permission to explore. Read books that challenge you. Listen to perspectives that inspire you. And most importantly, trust your own experience. The divine isn't found in someone else's blueprint, but in the quiet moments when you realize you're not alone. But here's a secret. The silence isn't empty. It's full. It's full of answers waiting to be heard, wisdom waiting to be discovered, and peace waiting to be felt. But you have to be brave enough to sit in it. One of the biggest losses people feel when they leave the church is the sense of community. And let's be real, that loss is painful. But here's the truth. Your people are out there. There are others walking this same path, people who understand what you're going through, people who are building their own spiritual lives outside traditional systems, people who are searching, just like you. You might find them in unexpected places, spiritual groups online, meditation circles, book clubs centered around personal growth, or simply through conversations with like-minded friends. Community doesn't have to look like a weekly gathering in a building. It can be a single friend who understands you, an online group where you feel seen, or even moments of connection with strangers who share a similar perspective. Don't give up on finding your people. Let's talk about guilt, because even after leaving it lingers. You might feel guilty for questioning what you were taught, for disappointing your family or your community, or for wondering if you made the wrong choice. But guilt is a weight you were never meant to carry. You're not betraying anyone by following your truth. You're not abandoning anything sacred by asking questions. You're being honest. You're being brave. And if there's one thing the divine values, it's truth. So let go of the guilt. Forgive yourself for the moments of doubt, for the fear, for the uncertainty. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to seek something deeper. Right now, you might still feel lost. But here's the thing about the wilderness. It's beautiful. It's raw, untamed, and full of possibility. You're not confined by walls here. You're not limited by rules or rituals. You're free. Free to ask questions. Free to explore. Free to build a spiritual life that feels alive, meaningful, and true. Because the divine isn't something you left behind, it's something you're walking towards. And wherever this path leads you, you are exactly where you're meant to be. If this video spoke to you, let us know in the comments below. Share your story, share your questions, share your truth. If you found this video valuable, please consider liking it, subscribing to our channel, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Because this journey isn't meant to be walked alone. You're part of something bigger. And together, we're finding our way home.